Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 142. We've got a great guest today, really cool lesson in perseverance, undrafted free agent who made it all the way to the big leagues and has had some success there. Embracing unique. It's a funky delivery with an interesting pitch mix, which we'll talk about, but also just a lot of good lessons learned from, everything from Tommy John surgery to going to junior college before he wound up as a Division I player. Really enjoyed this, a guy that we're fortunate to work with at Cressey Sports Performance Florida, so I see him on a daily basis, and just a great hard worker and a really good story, so I think we're all in for a treat here. This episode is brought to you by Proteus Motion. Proteus has developed the only practical and accurate way to quickly measure physical strength and speed across the entire body. Power is plane specific, and most of human movement is divided into 3 dimensions, but strength and power has typically been measured using one-dimensional movements performed in a straight line, things like the squat and the bench press. Measuring more than that can require numerous pieces of lab-grade equipment and hours of time. Proteus Insight softwares give trainers the ability to focus precisely on what, where, why, and how to personalize training programs. In as little as 4 minutes, Proteus software guides users through full-body assessments that test all planes of movement and delivers unprecedented data on precisely what areas of the body need improvement and where an athlete's movement falls on the force-velocity curve. Set demographic filters to compare an individual to someone like them using Proteus's proprietary database of millions of reps. Get insights and actionable and understandable recommendations to work into programming. Proteus Insights software delivers the most personalized training insights in history. On a personal level, I've been a big fan of Proteus for the past few years. We have a unit in both Cressey Sports Performance facilities, and I actually helped to develop the Cressey Power Test for rotational athletes. The information we've gathered from this testing has been an absolute game changer in helping us to more optimally program for our athletes. Additionally, as a training initiative, work on the Proteus has allowed us to train different points on the force velocity curve and rotational patterns in ways that medicine ball work alone could never do. Proteus is doing for full body physical strength what the X-ray and MRI have done for body imaging. It saves coaches a lot of time and headaches in their assessment of what makes an athlete successful and what qualities need to be improved to take that athlete to the next level. Learn more about this revolutionary performance testing and training solution that is an essential component of sports performance and sports medicine settings across the U.S. and Canada at www.proteusmotion.com/elite. You can also learn more about them by listening to episode 106 of this Elite Baseball Development Podcast. Again, that's www.proteusmotion.com/elite. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. Today's guest is a right-handed pitcher who grew up in Boynton Beach, Florida. After 1 year of junior college at Palm Beach State, he headed to the University of South Florida. In 2 years there, he logged 159 innings and 164 strikeouts and a 3.33 ERA. He then signed as an undrafted free agent with Milwaukee Brewers after the 2018 MLB draft. In pro ball, he moved to the bullpen and worked his way up the ranks over the 2018 and 19 seasons before missing the entire 2020 season due to the cancellation of the minor league season because of the COVID pandemic. When baseball restarted in 2021, he went directly to AA and advanced to AAA by the end of the season. He began the 2022 season in AAA before the Brewers called him up to the big leagues on May 30th, 2022. He made his MLB debut 3 days later. In his first year in the big leagues, he made 30 appearances, logging 34.2 innings with 40 strikeouts, 13 walks, and a 2.86 ERA. Please welcome to the show, Peter Strzelecki.
Peter, my man, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, tell me where you are at right now. This is definitely one of the more intriguing interview setups we've got.
I honestly felt like you would like this. So I'm at my high school in the classroom while the high school basketball team is playing. Literally, you may even be you probably won't be able to hear them, but right across the hall there's the high school gym. So I'm in one of my high school classes.
I like it. And chance to drop a little feather in your cap. Your number was retired there last week.
Yeah, it was.
Kind of the big man on campus. You got full access to school now. I love it.
Just good relationships, just keep good relationships.
That's what it's about, man. All right. So let's talk this through, dude. You're a unique breed because, and it's actually fitting that you're at your high school. You're a South Florida kid who actually played multiple sports in high school. And normally the way like year-round baseball works, people get squeezed out. The seasons overlap too much. You got travel ball pointing in a bunch of different directions. How did your sports calendar work out? And like, what did it do for your development, as a baseball player, big picture?
My schedule was, my first year I just did basketball and baseball. So in the fall, I would, down here we do fall baseball, which is just it's just really to get reps, meet your teammates, and build chemistry. So I'd show up to fall ball for maybe a couple weeks and then get into basketball season. I'd start basketball. I'd play that out all the way until the first game of high school baseball. Like 1 year, I literally, the first day out of basketball season, I pitched 6 1/3 against Jupiter High. So like probably not the smartest now that, I've learned, but that was most of my 3 years. And then 1 year, my sophomore year, I played football. I was a quarterback, and unfortunately, that was too much. The high school football coach at the time asked me if I could quit one of the other sports, and I said absolutely not. Those are my 2 favorite sports. So I had to step down from playing quarterback, and it ended up working out for them and for me, and I just played basketball. But it was crazy, going straight from basketball to baseball. But I was a kid, I didn't really know about, you're supposed to have your arm in shape and all these things that I know now. So it was crazy, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
As I said, the game is so much more specialized now. You kind of like appreciate the bygone era when athletes were athletes. Were you also involved in strength and conditioning in high school, or did that come later?
That came later. That actually came when I got to USF. I didn't even do much training in JUCO. I didn't know much of it. We just went to the field, practice, and then I'd go play 7-8 games a day of basketball at the 24-hour fitness. That was my training.
I was going to say it probably preserves some important athleticism, but you hinted at the JUCO experience, and I know a lot of athletes everywhere, and certainly a bunch that are listening to this podcast. They're all like very dead set on the Division I dream, and like that's the love affair as they come out of high school. But you found your way by going to Palm Beach State first. Talking about what went into the decision to go play junior college baseball and how your recruiting process and your development kind of played out on your path through college ball.
So for me, I was getting, contacted by Division I's. Originally I thought even if you committed to JUCO, you could still talk to D1s, which you can, but the Division I's I was talking to, like FAU, they had relationships with Palm Beach State. So they were, once I did that, they were kind of like, hey, we're going to stop recruiting you, but we'll be watching you at Palm Beach State. And it is what it is. But for me, I was hurt. Like my senior year, I wasn't healthy. I had a bone spur, and I didn't throw a lot of innings. I played more center field and shortstop and just random positions and hit because I had the bone spur. But going to Palm Beach State, I think it's just all part of the journey of making me who I am. We didn't have a locker room there. We didn't have the greatest, equipment, whatever, but it definitely helped me become the person I am today. So, I think when I talk to guys, it's, these high school kids that I talk to here when I come back and help, or even kids, I train, whatever, I tell them, like, it's just about opportunity. And, if you do what you have to do, man, they're going to find you. You don't have to just put the pressure on yourself to go there. Some guys, even now, they'll just not go to D1 just to keep their draft eligibility open. So, but I think the junior college route, if you can do it, like obviously D1, if you have a certain school, you go there. But I think it just makes you a stronger, individual, a stronger player, and just overall a better person. So.
Yeah, and I mean, looking back, I actually pulled up your like Division I statistics. Like your average fastball velocity, your sophomore year, so your first year at USF was 87.4. I got to assume it was a little bit below that when you're in junior college. Like, what kind of an arm were you in high school? Like coming out as a senior, were you 82, 84? What was the number?
So for me, I had the bone spur. I threw upper 80s in high school. I was a harder thrower. But once I had the bone spur, I got that removed. I got to Palm Beach State. I actually was throwing, my freshman year, I was throwing 92, 95. I was throwing deep. And actually, I'll talk about more of that in the next part of this. But, I was a thrower. I threw hard. But then I ended up blowing out, which what I was told was the bone spur kind of was, related to that. When I got to my sophomore year at Palm Beach State, I blew out. And then I went to USF and had the Tommy John, but I came back, my arm slot wasn't the same. I didn't have all the video and the technology. I was throwing from over the top when I have, my arm slot now is more lower. So the velo wasn't the same, but what it did for me, it helped me become a pitcher. And then, going into, this is more for the next questions, but it helped me going into pro ball where now I had a combination of knowing how to pitch, but also I got my velo back, which, as a thrower. So that's kind of what my story was with that.
I love it. I mean, so many guys look at the Tommy John period as like a massive like setback in their career. Like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. It seems like it was really an opportunity to figure out what made you who you are.
Yeah, it was definitely frustrating because the velocity wasn't where it was, and the draft and all that stuff. But I didn't allow that to affect me, on the mound. I still went out there. I competed for my team. I was able to put up, all conference numbers both years. I didn't get drafted for it, but it definitely taught me how to use my pitches and be more precise with the location and sequencing. So then when I did get to pro ball and I, for some reason, figured out my arm slot wasn't where it needed to go back to normal. Boom, the velocity came back right away. And then it allowed me to be, an even better pitcher than when I was at USF.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. You obviously put up some great numbers at USF. You weren't drafted, but you were signed shortly thereafter by the Brewers as a free agent. And they immediately moved you to the bullpen. And I'm curious, the velocity bumped up. Obviously, the results have been outstanding. You kind of searched through minor league baseball. What was it? I mean, was it the delivery? Was it, a different mentality? Was it a change to the pitch mix? When you look back at what made you almost more successful as a pro pitcher than as a college pitcher, what were the biggest adjustments?
I think a little bit of that was what I said, just from combining the pitching with the throwing, getting my velocity back to where it was before Tommy John, being a better pitcher where, locating my stuff, understanding that you're not just trying to throw the ball by guys, you're trying to set up pitches, that kind of stuff. And then honestly, like, I just had that effort mentality, you know what I'm saying? I treated every outing like it could have been my last, just because of being undrafted and, you get there and you see kind of how it goes with pro ball, especially for a guy. And I just was real with myself. I was very realistic. That's one thing I try to, be is very realistic with everything in life. So I just treated it like every outing could be my last. Don't give in. Don't, give out, whatever. And I just kept that, a thing I go by is like, you can't spell compete without Pete. Like, I literally live by that. Like, I said that before, like, but it's really how I go about it, man. Like, I just try to go out there and leave it all. And then, as I continue to throw more in pro ball, I just, you learn about yourself. You learn about your pitches, what works, what doesn't work. And then getting there with the technology they have with the TrackMan and all that, they help me and allow me to understand what works even more for me, throwing up in the zone, even though I don't throw 100 and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. It's interesting because like Tim Collins was one of our first big leaguers all the way back in the day. And Tim was an undrafted free agent, just like you. 2007 is when he was brought into Major League Baseball, and he was on an opening day roster in 11. And I go back and I look at it, and he had to put up absolutely like comic book numbers as an undrafted free agent to basically do what he did. And man, you weren't far off from that. I mean, you were an undrafted free agent in 2018. And you basically did it in the exact same, timeline. You were a big leaguer in 2022, and that includes a lost year for the pandemic. But along the way, I know, just like in passing, we had conversations, man. You were frustrated because you were putting up the numbers, and it wasn't easy just to like skip a level or anything like that. Whereas first rounders can, all right, high, it doesn't matter. You really have to check every box. Like, was there a psychological aspect of that too, of like knowing that you had to be effectively better than a guy that was, drafted in top 5 rounds? Like, did that weigh on you? Did it motivate you? How did you view it?
It definitely was just it was something that motivated me. There's a lot of things that I have that motivate me, and that was definitely one of them, and it's just understanding that, like, I knew I wasn't a high draft pick. So, I just knew I had to go out there and show them what I could do. And I knew that's with everything, though. That's everything in life. Even when I got to college, like, I had to show them what I could do. And so for me, it was really just use it as a motivation, chip on the shoulder, and go out there and just compete and leave it all out there. There was times in my career where, in the lower levels where I thought I was pitching really good, and I was just, one thing I was taught early was never play GM in baseball. I was taught, you never play GM in my first year in pro ball. So I never did that, but there was times where, I'd see things happen and I'd be like, you know what, man, like, it is what it is. I can't control that. Like, control what I can control. And I did that. And I'm not saying it was easy at all, because I'd be lying to you, but I just know, like, and you've heard me talk about it before. It's just, you got to just stay locked in and stay focused, man. Like, you can voice your frustration sometimes, but nobody wants to hear it. Just use it as motivation. So that's what I did.
I love that. And, just as you were getting some momentum on your side, and I just hinted at it, like, the pandemic happened and you missed a season. And I always think, Batman, you were one of those guys. I remember you and Spencer Stockton and Jack Cushing, like just some of these guys that stand in my head. It's like you basically made your own season at CSP that summer of 2020. Like you can't just go out and lose out on the 80 innings or whatever it is that you were counting on. Talk about like the mentality, like going into that. What did you learn going through that experience, and what changed for you as a pitcher over the course of that summer?
I would say that was one of the moments in my career where I knew that I could be a big leaguer. I just had to go out there and prove it. But being around those guys, the guys in the big leagues or the AAA guys, all those guys, it gave me like the confidence and showing me like, you know what, dude, like just because you're here and in this level and you're not whatever, like you have the stuff, like you have the ability, like you face these big league hitters, you've gotten them out. Like that for me was the moment where I turned and I said, you know what, like I know I can do it. I just need to like prove it and go out there and just keep knocking on the door. But that was the moment for me. And like you said, I went out there, I pretty much got a regular season in. I was hinted, like they told me I might go to the alternate site, but I didn't. So that was just another chip of motivation, but that was really the summer that kind of helped me like, because I'm good mentally. Like mentally, I think I'm pretty strong up there. I think I'm good. But that was the moment where it was like, nah, dude, you see all these guys, they're normal dudes, man. They're regular dudes. Like sometimes people will portray them as like aliens, like as big leaguers. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how it was portrayed to me at times in the lower levels. And I seen big leaguers before, but the way it was being portrayed to me was, nah, dude, they're in a whole nother atmosphere. Like you're not even close to that. But then that summer was like, no, I actually am, man. And that really was for me, that was the icing on the cake of like, just go put the work in, dude, and something will happen at some point.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to that, and it was like one of those 2020 seasons. I mean, we had college guys that were competing against big leaguers and live ABs and things like that. And you never really realize how good you are until you effectively play up to the competition. And I look back on it, man, summer 2020 at our facility was like a scouting director's dream. Like it was a chance to basically see how, dozens of guys in like low A, high A would fare against big league hitters over the course of a couple months. It was, looking back, it was one of my favorite times in the history of the facility. And it only worked because you guys were like, nobody sat around and moped. Like everybody agreed they were going to go out, they were going to work, they were going to get their work in. And we had guys that got over 100 innings that summer just so that they didn't have like a drop off going into the next calendar year. So it was pretty cool, man. So I'm curious, like you talked about the delivery changing over the years, right? Like Tommy John happens, the arm action kind of climbs up a little bit. It's now come back down, and you're kind of like one of those unique attack angle four seam guys. It's a big time crossfire delivery. You get a high spin four seamer from it's a very traditional lower slot. For you, like, first off, talk to me about how you wound up there, and then maybe building on that, like what are the checkpoints so that you're going well?
So for me, I'm probably the type of guy you do the opposite when it comes to pitching coach to a player, right? Like, I'm not the traditional. So I never had a pitching coach growing up unless it was a coach just on one of my teams, right? So that's an interesting question when it comes to where did it start. I just think that was a natural arm slot for me. I don't know if it was from growing up, playing around, like throwing the tennis ball, like playing baseball at the neighborhood or football. And I don't know what that came from, but it just felt natural. So Palm Beach State, through our high school, through Palm Beach State, I threw like that, and it ended up like being good. And then I remember when I went to USF, the arm slot went up and my shoulder never felt great. I was always feeling like soreness in there, and then finally got back. But for me, I keep it simple when it comes to keys. I think don't rush, because if you ever see me pitch, I'm a real big tempo guy too. Like I like to get the ball and go, and sometimes the only thing I can do with that is I'll start rushing. And there's a difference between being quick and rushing. Those are really my only cues. It's just don't rush and let the arm get late. Besides that, I try to keep it as simple as possible. Like, I never had a pitching coach when it came to, coming up, unless, like I said, it was just, USF, Palm Beach State, or in high school. So that's really what it is. I try to keep it as simple as possible. This game's already hard enough as it is. So, you know what I'm saying? So I try to keep it literally as simple as I can.
Was there an adjustment? I know you started a ton in college and then obviously going to pretty much exclusively relieving in pro ball. Was it Was that a big difference for you, or was it something that came very naturally?
At first, it was definitely a difference just because I'm a huge routine guy. I'm all about a routine. So, but once I was able to get a routine, it felt natural. Now I think back, I'm like, man, what would it be like to start again? I think like that. But I think with a good routine, you can get comfortable with anything, and that's what it ended up being for me.
So that delivery we talked about it also sets you up for a slider with a ton of horizontal movement, right? It's one of the best in baseball. And the sweep has gotten bigger, and you've certainly added velocity over the last couple of years. What were the things that helped your slider take like such a big step forward? I mean, was it always good and you just learned to refine it, or did you change a grip? Did you change a mentality with over the last couple of years?
Honestly, I truly believe it was always a solid pitch, and I think it's still solid. I don't try to think it's great because you know what I'm saying. Like I appreciate when everyone and people say that, but I think it definitely got more horizontal movement. I think that's just with getting stronger and getting my arm has been in great shape just with the training we do and the arm care I do and all that stuff. And so I think just that has helped the movement profile and being able to as I played more baseball, I've gotten more comfortable with messing with the ball and doing stuff like that. I think I can make the ball move kind of a couple of different ways and still throw the same slider, but it have two different movements with the same grip. But yeah, I think it's gotten better just because, and I also take things from guys like, Taylor Rogers was a great guy. Like when it came to, we would talk about the slider all the time, he's left-handed, but it's similar in a way. And I was picking his brain, like, how do you throw the slider when you want to sneak one in a backdoor situation? So it's situations like that too that have helped me talking with guys like him, with similar pitches like me, and helping me because obviously at the big league level it's a different ball game. So just little things that you could take from someone, it helps a lot.
One thing I've heard over the years, actually originally talking with like Steve Cishek about it, just because he had somewhat of a lower slot as well, is like, how do you attack your throwing program? Like how far will you long toss? And when you're long tossing, like, are you mindful of not coming out of your delivery, or will you let a little bit more go when you're trying to air it out a little bit more?
Once I get past 75 feet, I will I'll crow hop. I'll do that to not mess up, because I noticed in the past when I would go too far and then try to still like be strong and stay within my mechanics, it would play with stuff. So once I get past 75 feet, I hop with it, and I still make sure I'm cross body and stuff. But then the ball tails on me. So in season I won't go past 120 feet. That's like a long day for me.
Yep.
That's like extreme day. Most of the time it's 90 feet. And in the off season I will long toss just because I feel like it's good, just to let the ball go and feel it coming out deep, and that extension is good. But yeah, I'm not big into the like throwing far, especially as a reliever. You know what I'm saying? I just stay within that, and I feel like that's what works for me. So that's what I do.
And there's a changeup too. Like we didn't even talk about that. You don't obviously use it nearly as much, but there's a lot of feel for it. Like you don't necessarily see a ton of guys that are crazy crossfire changeups. Like, what is it that like makes it an effective pitch for you? Like without, do you still feel like from that delivery you're able to like manipulate the baseball you need to, or is it like a grip it and rip it pitch still for you?
It's definitely a finesse pitch for me. Yeah. It also, that was my best pitch in college. My changeup was my best like off-speed pitch. But yeah, for me, it's just I throw it a lot. I throw it every day, especially during the season. I throw it because it's definitely a field pitch. It's you got to have that finesse with it. But I would say there's a cue for that one where I just try to keep it shorter, like with my arm a little bit, just to not get too long. It's not noticeable to the naked eye, but it's just a little cue that helps me stay, because with my arms, the way I throw from my slot, if I get too like rotational and like kind of it gets out and then it'll cut on me. So I got to make sure I'm like, I use my thumb, stay on top of it, and then get that break, and I'll use it on the other side of the plate, but not a lot, on the glove side, because it's at its best when it's middle or arm side. But yeah, it's definitely, I feel like that's a pitch that doesn't get talked about as much, but I think it's a great pitch.
Absolutely. And maybe, you hinted at a little bit with some of the Taylor Rogers discussion, who's a wonderful guy. We need to get him on the podcast. I love Taylor. But you and I talked recently about some of the important lessons that you learned in your first year in a major league bullpen. You talked about like Boxberger being a great mentor to you, but what are some of the big takeaways, for our listeners that you learned this year and, kind of a half season in the big leagues?
I would say for me, I kind of, in the beginning, especially as a young guy, like I would just sit back and kind of watch from afar and see, what these guys did from a routine standpoint. And, McGee is another guy too. That guy's been playing for 14, I don't know how many years our conversation was, I was up for a little bit, it was brief. He may or may not even remember me, but like all jokes aside, but like I had a great conversation with him. Just, he said, I do T-spine. It helps me, like just little things like that where it's so random, but I took that and added that to my routine before the game. Rogers with the slider, Boxberger with just every day, like, how to be a guy like him who's 9 years, almost 10 years this year in the show, like those guys, like until you get there, you don't understand how hard it is to stay there. And, that's why I'm so appreciative of those guys. Brent Suter just helping me be a constant professional every day, and just being a great dude. And even when you have the bad outings, like don't be that one guy, like be the same guy every day, work hard. There were so many that I can't even think off the top of the head.
Yeah.
Like I was so fortunate with that group of guys, man. Like, Devin helping me just, being confident and just telling me I'm good. Like, you're good. Like every day I'd be talking, like, he's like, dude, you're good. Stop. Like he'd get mad at me if I was something like that, there's an option coming up, don't talk like that. Like just focus here. You're here today. Like get your work in, when your name's called, go out there and perform. And so I was just fortunate to have that group, man. There were so many of those guys. Bush, another guy. Like I don't want to leave anyone out, but just a great group, man, that really helped me a lot. And I couldn't imagine being with a better group than what I was and helping me, hopefully having a long, successful career because of those guys.
As a friendly reminder, this episode is brought to you by Proteus Motion. Proteus's resistance training is known as 3D resistance, and it's revolutionizing the way that we can train athletes in a variety of planes of motion, and also the way that we can test those athletes to best design programs to make them successful. We've used Proteus at Cressey Sports Performance for the past few years and collaborated them to develop the Cressey Power Test for rotational athletes. If you're working with baseball players, this is a must-have tool for making sure that you design the right kind of programs for your athletes to get them to where they want to be as quickly and safely as possible. The Proteus allows you to train various points rotationally on the force velocity curve in ways that you just can't get with medicine balls, weighted bats, things like that. Again, you can learn more about Proteus at proteusmotion.com. Again, that's proteusmotion.com, Proteus motion.com.
And one of the things that I thought was cool is like you didn't just get up there, like you were I think second in the team in appearances over the last couple months of the season, and your workload went up quite a bit. Like, what did you have to learn about the management of just the overall stress, right? Because in the minor leagues, everything's really predictable, right? It's maybe every other day, like you very rarely go back to back. And the big leagues, you get thrown to the wolves, especially because you guys were in a playoff race there. So what were some of the things that you learned about yourself as you kind of encountered higher volume and frequency?
The first thing I learned, the best ability is availability. So like being available for your team, and then also being there for when guys go 3 days in a row. You could pick those guys up, or guys went back to back. That was one of the first things I learned. Just taking care of my stuff. Brent Suter was huge. He's like, hey man, when you get home, like you should be doing the Mark Pro, Mark Pro every night. Like that was one of the things I added to my routine. I ended up investing in one and buying one. So now, if I threw or if I was feeling like a little heavy, boom, like I was doing the Mark Pro every night in the hotel or wherever I was at. That's something that helped me. And it's just little things like that. And then how you eat, what you're doing in the weight room. The lifts that I would do, I would make sure I was still available, like fresh for the day, the games. And it's just a lot of little things, man, that people don't really see until you're in that moment, and I didn't even see it because I'd never been to a big league camp. Yeah. I've never met any of those guys really until the day I showed up to the big league. So, just, you got to really, really pay attention to the way you go about your day, man. Every minute matters. Hydrating, what you're putting in, fueling your body's your temple. So there's a lot of things like that I looked at, and I've taken from that. I put now into my off season with the way I eat, how I'm taking my recovery seriously, and all that kind of stuff.
It's big, man. You might only go out there and throw 8 pitches, but it might be 18 hours to actually prepare for it. So I think people forget like how much has to go in just to make sure that 1% is optimized.
100%. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, as you think about all this stuff, what does the casual fan not necessarily appreciate about like MLB bullpen pitchers? Whether they're hanging or something like that. What are the bigger things that you think that a casual fan could benefit from hearing?
I would say the grind of having to be locked in every single day, even if you're not, unless it's a day where you've been told by the coaching staff, like, hey, you're down today. Like we had a little thing where if you were in this like hot tub or something, you were down that day, and it's like a spa day or whatever, right? But the being locked in, even if you don't pitch, it is so draining. Like the bright lights, like all that stuff, like it is draining, and you have to like be locked in. Like especially a guy like me, where I never knew when I was going to pitch. I didn't know if I threw in every inning this year in the big leagues besides the second inning. I threw in the first and then the third all the way to the ninth. So just having to be locked in and focused, and you're looking at scouting reports, you're watching swings, you're looking at all those things, like it's a lot. And then the thing that's the most fans that they don't notice is I had a couple outings this year, at least 3 or 4, where I was told at 12 o'clock at night I had a flight at 3 in the morning, and I had to fly to Milwaukee or somewhere and be ready to pitch that day. And I pitched on every single day but one, and they don't see that. So if you have a bad outing, which nobody cares, but you're exhausted. What I'm saying?
That's like 2 hours less.
Yeah, I had an outing. I'll never forget. We were facing Washington. I was like 91 to come out of the game, and I was exhausted. But whatever. Like you got to battle, right? I get hit with a line drive off the leg, like 98. I catch it, and then after that, I guess my velo went back to like 94, and my pitching coach was like, "Yo, what happened? You took that? It took a ball off the leg to wake up." And I was like, "Man, you're right. I'm sorry. I gotta be better than that." So it's just little things like that you might not see and you don't appreciate until you go through that grind where you're just in the middle of the night, like flying around. And so it's just little stuff like that. But it's part of it's what you sign up to do. So you gotta live with it and find ways to be successful with it.
It's a different world. We're talking about a little bit about your training and your throwing in season. You obviously talked about like how far you long toss and stuff like that. Did you throw every day with like pregame catch play?
Yeah, I threw every day unless it was a day where I was down, and then they would be like, you could take today off. So those are the only days I wouldn't throw unless it was like a legit off day.
Yeah. What about the training side of things, sprinting, lifting, stuff like that?
Training, I would set Tuesday, Fridays as like that's a thing I got from a guy with us. Every Tuesday, Friday, no matter what, if you pitch, you didn't pitch, whatever. Every Tuesday, Friday, I'd lift, and then as the season goes on, I kind of like get off the weights a little bit, and then get more into like sprinting and body stuff, like movement stuff. And then we in Milwaukee, we're fortunate enough to have like a pool work where we could do like a pool workout. So I would do that towards the end of the season.
Nice, man. It's always an adjustment, figuring out what works and what doesn't over a long haul. All right, we always wrap up with a lightning round, and I'm curious to see your answers on some of this stuff because I do know you still coach on the side. You come back, you help out in your communities, and you also gone out of your way to take a lot of like younger guys under your wing. So, favorite teammate of all time and why? And you can pick a couple if you want to.
Yeah, I got a couple. Most recently Brent Suter, man, like that guy took me under his wing. He welcomed me into his house. I got to stay with him, and like I said, just helping me with like the transition of like becoming a big leaguer, like that. He did more for me than he'll ever know, even though I tell him that. But Brent Suter, man, I gotta think. So then another guy for me is Bryce Terang in the minor leagues. Him and this guy named David Fry, man, we're still so close to this day. Bryce, I still see him because we were in AAA living together. Just two other guys that we came in at the same year, 2018. We kind of went up with each other. So, those are two guys that, I've just been doing the grind with. It's not like doing the grind with some people that you could say, we went this level, this level, this level. So those are two teammates. And then, man, college, I had a lot of good teammates in college. So I don't want to keep going. I know it's lightning round, so go ahead.
No, that's all good, man. More merrier. What pitchers do you like to watch and why? Like, I'm curious just because the delivery is obviously unique, but I'm sure there's some guys that you really model yourself after.
I like to watch my friends, but besides that, I definitely Ottavino was a name that I watched, but he was a comparison at one time, then he wasn't, then he was again. So him, like seeing him this year, he has no idea that I exist on this earth, but I saw him when we played them, and I was like, this is kind of like a crazy moment. Like people would like compare our deliveries and stuff. Obviously, I would kill to be, the career he's had and the success he's had, unbelievable. But he's very similar, just with the crossbody and the slider. But then he throws a sinker, I throw a four seam, so that's a little different. But the mechanics, and then Houston Street is one that I just recently got. I don't know, my bullpen coach says I'm Houston Street. I didn't really get to watch too much film on him, obviously, because he's played a couple years back. But yeah, I don't really watch too many guys, honestly, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but definitely Ottavino would be the one guy that I did when I was coming up for sure.
That's a good one, and a great dude too. You've been around a lot of MLB veterans at CSP. You've obviously rubbed elbows with guys like Scherzer and Verlander and Paul Goldschmidt and Arenado, a lot of these guys during pandemic, lockout, all that stuff. As you look back, like what's the most helpful lesson that you feel like you learned from one or more of them? Like what stands out in your mind as something that changed your career for the better?
I would say it's more not even with the baseball side of it, just seeing how they go about their their work, and just seeing like I told you how they're regular dudes, man, that are just freaks, obviously, when it comes to being incredibly good at baseball, but they're just really good dudes. And I see them in the gym. I don't really go up to them as much, my personality kind of I'm more, but I observe. I'm very observant, and just the way they treat guys, no matter what level you're at, you don't need to know someone's name, but I'm sure they know the impact they have on these guys just by a small little conversation. So just seeing that from afar, to me, and then seeing those guys in person and training alongside them, like that was the days where I said, you know what, like I could really do this, man. Like I could really do this. And so that's really the biggest thing I took from those guys, not even having conversation with them, but just watching them, how they are as people, and, obviously seeing how good they are.
Yeah. They're not satisfied. It'd be really easy to get satisfied with, 10 plus years in the show and money in the bank. So I think that's big for our guys. What about some advice for a teenage Peter? Like if you go back in time and talk to yourself at 16, what would you say?
I would definitely tell myself to take training more seriously. Just cause I didn't know any, not that I didn't want to work hard. I just didn't know. I had no idea. So definitely training would be one. With the throwing as well, keeping your arm in shape. It's like running. You want to be in good shape, you got to run. Same thing with throwing. You need to throw. Get build up to be. So that's something I'll tell myself, and I would definitely just do what I do to these kids now, and just say, hey man, like if you have a dream, push, work, there's going to be obstacles. It's not going to be easy. Nothing in life is easy, but just keep doing what you're doing, man. And you'll eventually get somewhere where you want to be. And obviously that I've been fortunate for that to happen. So
that's a really good spot to end on, man. That's a good, you're a closer in the making, right? Hey, thanks for taking the time, dude. On a personal level, it's been awesome to see your success. I know how hard you worked behind the scenes to get where you are, and you making a debut this year was a big moment for everybody at the facility. And I know we were cheering you on from afar, not just because of the player you are, but obviously the person you are. I know you do a lot in your community and you treat people right. So appreciate you taking the time to come on.
I appreciate it. I wouldn't be where I'm at without CSP. So that's why I'll never not keep talking about CSP. So I'm very appreciative of all you guys.
All good, my man. Now go out to that basketball game. Cheer your team on, all right?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
See you guys.